Hello and welcome to this Sigma presentation. Today we're going to have a look at the USB dock UD01, which is a product we launched as part of the Sigma Global Vision initiative in around about 2012-2013. The dock itself is this little guy here, not very much to it. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at the Sigma Optimization Pro software, which is the magic that makes the USB dock work in actual fact, which lenses will and will not work with the dock, how to connect the dock to your computer, how to connect the lens to the dock, and you can see that's fairly straightforward. It's just like a back cap in truth. Why you might wish to do a firmware update on your lens, how to do a firmware update on your lens, how to add focus correction values if you have a front or back focus issue, and finally we'll look at how to customize those sport lenses and the 100-400 DG, which have the C1 C2 customization switch. So let's start by going to the Sigma UK website, which is just here, and what you'll find at the top of the page is the support tab. Go to downloads, go to software and firmware, and then go to Sigma Optimization Pro. All very straightforward. This link will take you through to our parent company website at sigmaglobal.com. Get rid of the cookie warning, and from here we just scroll down. And you need to choose between a Windows PC and a Macintosh computer. It's worth noting that it will need to be a computer and not a mobile device. It won't work with a mobile phone or an iPad or a tablet computer or anything of that nature, an actual Windows PC or an actual Macintosh computer. Also worth mentioning at this time, when you have the USB dock connected to your computer, it's quite important the power supply doesn't get interrupted. So if you're using a laptop, run it from mains power would be ideal. In fact, a laptop would be ideal for two reasons. You get the mains power plus the battery backup, of course. Anyway, to get the software, we click on the download link. We get the software agreement, scroll to the bottom, and obviously we accept that and hit the download button and go through the install process. Obviously, I already have Optimization Pro set on my computer, so I don't need to do that at this stage. So as regards to actually physically connecting the USB dock to the computer, the dock is supplied with a standard USB cable, so a standard big connector at one end and the little connector at the other end, and obviously the big one goes inside of the computer. The smaller end, you'll find a port on the side of the USB dock just here, and make sure I get it the right way up. It's USB 2, of course, from 2013, and there we go. That's the USB dock connected to the computer. At this stage, what we'll do is we'll put the lens on the USB dock. That works just like the camera. You've got a red dot on the USB dock, you've got the orientation dot on the lens. Line the two up, and it just goes together like that. Then you'll see the little green light at the back lights up. Very important, when the light is constant like this, you can remove the lens from the dock quite safely. If the light is flashing, it means it's writing information to the lens, and there is a risk that you might damage or corrupt the file if you remove the lens during the write process. So if the light is flashing, don't remove your lens. So let's go to the Sigma Optimization Pro software. There we go. And I'm now going to connect a lens to this. So what we'll see is that the software automatically recognizes there is a lens connected. it will go off to the database and see if there's a firmware update for the lens, and indeed there is. And that's a point that needs to be made. You can only use the Optimization Pro software and the USB dock when you're connected to the internet. Even if you're doing focus corrections, you still need to be connected to the internet. There's never a reason not to update the firmware, so I'm just going to go ahead and click yes and agree, and automatically it will download the update, and you'll see the flashing light on the back of the USB dock when you do this at home. The reasons you might need or wish to update your firmware, there's really two. We obviously launch lenses on a regular basis, and from time to time our technicians and engineers will find a way of improving the performance of the product, perhaps making the autofocus faster or some other feature of it. So we've updated our firmware. That was very painless. We're now going to look at customization and focus settings. Sorry, the second reason you might want to update your firmware, if you launch a lens a year ago and you update your camera firmware to a new operating environment today, well, a year ago, the last time the firmware was updated, it might not have been compatible with today's camera operating environment. So if that does happen, our engineers will release a firmware update, and you can simply update the lens without needing to send it back to us, which is very convenient. So focus corrections. This is a prime lens, so there's one row, and it asks you to look at 4 focusing distances, and you can enter adjustment values in each of these 4 boxes. So the way it works is you take a bunch of pictures, and you take each picture at the distance indicated on the focus scale here with a red line, and that's minimum distance, infinity, and the 2 positions in between. And you may find this is a very wide angle lens, so these 2 positions are actually quite close to the minimum focus distance. Once you take the pictures, you look at them on your computer and you feel if the lens is back focusing a little, so you want to focus here, but actually if your plane of focus is here on the photograph, then obviously you just need to move the bar front a little bit. Equally, now we're going to accept that. Equally, if you're focusing in front of your target, you can push the focus back a little bit, quite a lot in actual fact. And then when you're ready, you write that to the lens, you agree to the correction. The LED again will start flashing on the back of the USB dock, and we're done. Then you take another set of photographs and you see if those corrections have improved your result or not. Couple of pro tips: when you take the photographs, always use the maximum available aperture. On this lens it will be f1.8 to get the shallowest depth of field, so any discrepancies will show up most clear at the maximum aperture. And the other thing that I personally do is when I take these pictures, I take one picture with the eye level viewfinder and then a second picture with live view, so I actually get 8 pictures for every 4 adjustments. And I look at the first picture that I've taken with the eye level viewfinder and I compare it to the live view image, which is always tends to be a little bit sharper, and that gives me a clue as to if the correction is front or back. Usually it's very obvious if there is an adjustment needed, but sometimes, particularly at infinity focus, it can be a little tricky to establish if your equipment is focusing in front or behind the target. If you need to make further adjustments, then you simply input further adjustments as you see fit, and you can rewrite this as often as you need to. It's important to note that when you make these adjustments at the minimum focus distance or half a meter or infinity, whatever it may be, you're not just nailing in an adjustment at that point. The software will take all four on a prime lens and smooth them out over a logarithm across the whole focus range. So whereas micro adjusting the camera is one value when you turn it on or off, the USB dock is a much more nuanced correction and can give you a much better fine tuning of your lens to your camera. If for some reason you decide to remove these corrections, you get a new camera that doesn't require the correction, or you want to sell the lens or pass it on to somebody else and remove this correction, you can reset to default setting and it all zeroes out. Now I'm just going to put a different lens on the USB dock. This time it's a zoom lens. Go into customization and focus setting, and now you can see because we have a zoom lens, we don't just have the four distances, it also asks you to take test images at 4 focal lengths. So you fill in this whole chart. Useful to have a pen and paper handy when you do this, just to see what your previous correction was. And if you go too far one way, you can always go back, of course. So now with all of this information, the algorithm will make a correction in the lens to compensate for the lens and camera combination across the whole zoom range and focus range. And that's about as good a way of tailoring your lens to your camera equipment as I've ever seen, certainly. So what we've looked at so far is how you do a firmware update, how you would adjust focus issues or 4 focus issues. I'm going to take this lens off. There's my little green light, it's constant, so it's safe to remove the lens. The USB dock also enables you to access custom functions on those lenses that have them. Here we have the famous 150 to 600 Sport, very popular lens. There's also a contemporary version. So for the most part, Sport lenses and the 100-400 DG, the DSLR cameras, have all the usual controls along the side you would expect, but they also have an extra switch at the bottom here, which is a custom switch. It has 3 positions: off, C1 and C2. And we can customize those to various personal settings. This is a Nikon Fit lens. This is a Canon Fit USB dock. There is no issue in swapping over the dock from one fitting to another. So if you're in a household with sort of multiple cameras but only one computer, or you've only got the software installed on one computer, you don't need to worry about swapping that over. That works just fine. And again, that'll light up. If we go back to looking at the Optimization Pro software, so let's go to customization. Now there is a function with this where we can have manual override of the focus. So if you turn the focus ring, it will disable the AF and go into manual focus. And for those lenses where that's supported, you can adjust how much you have to turn the focus ring before that happens. That's not something I need to adjust on this lens. I'm happy the way it is. So let's go into the custom settings. 2 buttons on the lens, 2 buttons on the software. You're going to go into C1, and there are three things we can adjust, and these are for your personal preference. They're not there's not a right or wrong way of doing this. It's just what you want to tailor your lens as. And I should say at this point, if you buy a lens with a custom switch and you're happy with the way it works and you don't like tinkering with things, you like to take them out of the box and use them, that's absolutely fine. Your lens will work perfectly and as long as you're happy with it, that's all that matters. There is no need or obligation to use the custom functions if you don't wish to do so, or indeed to buy the USB dock if you don't wish to do so. But as we have it, the autofocus is set to what we believe is the optimal setting, balancing speed and accuracy. However, you may feel that if you're trying to photograph aircraft in flight or even birds in flight, you would like the autofocus to move a little bit faster. And that's absolutely fine. You can do that. It's only a small adjustment, it's not a radical change. But bear in mind, if you increase the focus speed, you do sacrifice slightly on the accuracy. At the same time, if you're photographing something that isn't moving terribly quickly, perhaps paddling boats on a lake, or ducks swimming on a lake, dragonfly on reed beds, we can make the autofocus run a little bit smoother, and we can increase the focusing accuracy. So it gives us a clearer indication in the viewfinder as we pass the in focus bit. But I'm going to set this lens up for motor racing. So I'm going to have fast autofocus. I can change the focus limiter setting. So as standard, the focus is set to 10 meters. But if I'm on a racetrack, I might not be able to get within 20 meters of the action. There might be a fence in the way. So I don't need this section of the focus scale. So I'm just going to chop it out, and I'm going to make my focus limiter start at 20 meters. I can also, if I wanted to, change it to a different range entirely. So it won't focus below 5 meters or above, I think that's 30 or so. But I want to go from 20 meters to infinity. And lastly, on the OS settings, again, I can increase the speed the OS works at. The downside of that is the viewfinder will move around a little bit more as I'm looking through it. But I want to track my sports cars as they go around the racetrack, so I'm going to go with actually a slightly slower OS setting. And there we have it. That's my custom 1 button setup. Now I'm going to set custom 2 up to photograph dragonfly. I don't need high speed AF. I want to prioritize smoothness and accuracy. I certainly don't need to focus all the way out to infinity. I've got a big telephoto lens. The dragonfly is going to be landing on a plant by a pond or something of that nature. I don't need to focus beyond 5 meters. That's the only part of the focus scale I need in C2. And lastly, because I am working close up with a big lens, I'm going to want dynamic OS. I'm going to want a faster OS. And there we go, that's writing that to the lens. Something to bear in mind with the custom functions. If you set a custom function, as we've just set the focus limiter to less than 5 meters, it will override the other switches on the lens. So where we have the focus limiter switch on the lens as standard, that's above 10 meters or below 10 meters. If we set a different focus scale on the C1 and C2 switch, and we have that turned on, that will override the focus limiter on here. We do occasionally get phone calls from people that say, my lens works perfectly, other than it won't focus over or under 20 meters. And then we say to people, do you have a USB dock? Have you got it set on C1 or C2? Did you set custom functions to change the focus limiter? Quite often when people first get the USB dock, they like to see what it can do. They like to set up custom functions, and maybe 6 months later, they've forgotten what setting they put on there. So if you do run into that situation where you have irregular behavior by the lens, just turn the C1, C2 switch to the off position, just to eliminate that possibility, or else put the lens on the USB dock and make sure that's got no settings on the C1, C2. Anyway, I think that about wraps it up for the UD01. It's a very useful tool, but by no means mandatory. So, for example, again, if you don't like tinkering with things yourself and you need a firmware update, you can always send the product to us at our service centre, and we'll do that for you. Firmware updates are free of charge. If you have a focusing issue and you either don't want to try and do it yourself, or you're still struggling to get it tuned in the way you want, then again you can send us the lens and ideally your camera as well, and we will tailor the lens to the camera. So we can do these things for you. The USB dock gives you another option where it's a lot more convenient to do it at home, it's a lot quicker to do it at home, and as far as focus correction goes, it's a lot more nuanced and exact than, for example, in-camera micro adjust. Anyway, thank you for watching. We do appreciate it, and we'll see you on the next video.